to my precious little pocket of the internet. I'm Dakota. It's a pleasure to meet you if we've not already met. I like to make videos where I ramble, but usually about books, so this is somewhat different whilst also not being different at all, but I'm rambling already. This is going to be about Lady Macbeth Syndrome. In this video, or video essay if you will, that makes me feel fancy, much fancier beyond my means, but we will be exploring Lady Macbeth Syndrome, the psychological phenomenon, the literary phenomenon, the way that media is influenced by this, some examples, some implications, and literature and film that has similar themes. I think this is really interesting because not many people know about it, and I want everyone to know about it because it greatly influences my work. Can we also just appreciate the mood that has been set as of this moment? I am really proud of the lighting right now. Anyway, moving on. Lady Macbeth is the wife of Macbeth, the titular protagonist from Shakespeare's famed play. This video will not simply be a character study on her, but more so an exploration on the effect that her character has. It's a whole damn psychological phenomenon, the syndrome in her honor. Honor's an interesting way to put it, but honor. And so I'm going to break it down for you. To really understand the phenomenon of it, you'll want to have a brief understanding of the play, which I will now grossly condense in order to house a general communal understanding of it. Excuse me if I condense too much. I really recommend reading the play. I'm sure some people have done it in high school, if not everyone. If you're not a Shakespeare fan, that's okay. That's what I'm here for. Let's move on. But before I jump straight into it, first a very quick word from today's very relevant sponsor, Skillshare. So Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of inspiring classes for anybody who wants to learn or refine a new skill or advance in their career. I'm an avid fan of Skillshare and I can confidently say I have learned so much from all the classes that they have to offer. As of late, I've been really interested in expanding upon my mediums of creative outlet, and one of these mediums is filmmaking. This class on screenwriting from Joshua Dickinson was crystal clear and very engaging and helped me gain confidence as I explore new creative territory. Expanding on this territory, this class from Simon Cade was brilliant. I'm quite passionate and at times quite rigid about making my content somewhat cinematic. And this class taught me so much about not only finding the confidence, but the logistics behind funding and equipment and all that may seem intimidating. This was very helpful and I'm very excited about future projects that will supplement my career. Making art is so important to me, so learning about different mediums of performing this art is vital. Skillshare offers so much more than classes for creative hobbies, like career-focused classes that are perfect for reinventing yourself and pursuing your passions. This class on creative confidence motivated me and reminded me why I do what I do and to pursue it unapologetically. And luckily for you, the first 1,000 people to follow the link in the description box and sign up to Skillshare will receive a 1-month free trial. I say why not? So Macbeth is a tragedy by Shakespeare, and it is the story of a Scottish general, Macbeth, who receives word via prophecy from 3 witches that he is to become king. There, however, is already a king, Duncan, and so encouraged by his highly ambitious and overtly cunning wife, Lady Macbeth, Macbeth kills Duncan to take his place on the throne, so he takes destiny in his own hands, I suppose. It's much more complicated than that, of course. He goes insane with paranoia and guilt. He kills much more people in order to keep his throne, and eventually he is overthrown himself and killed by somebody called Macduff, and end scene. But we don't care so much about Macbeth, we care more so about Lady Macbeth, so here is a brief breakdown of her character. In my humble opinion, Lady Macbeth is one of Shakespeare's most vivid and cunning and compelling and complicated and ambitious characters, let alone of his female characters. At the beginning of the play, she is depicted as ambitious and strong-willed and seeking power and supportive of her husband in the way where she is ultimately the driving force behind him that leads Macbeth to kill King Duncan. She encourages him to commit many other atrocities in the name of the throne and the prophecy that he is told to have. So ultimately she's in control at all times. She's the driving force behind the acts. Of course they're there in Macbeth, but she is the one that says, "Do it. I dare you." My idol. However, as the play progresses, as does Lady Macbeth's character, and she begins to unravel, she is consumed by the guilt of the bloodshed that she has caused by proxy, and while she has no blood on her own hands, she has blood on her spirit. Her famous soliloquy in Act 5 Scene 1, in which she declares out damned spot with the blood spots that are in fact not on her hands, is a wonderful depiction of her descent into insanity and the cause of her mental breakdown. Spoiler alert, in case you don't want me to spoil the end of Macbeth for you, in case you've somehow lived the most sheltered life in the world. By the end, she is so driven to madness by her guilt and the ritualistic washing of the blood that is not on her hands, she has driven herself to madness and eventually suicide. Lady Macbeth's character is complex because she is both a victim and a perpetrator. On one hand, she is a victim of her own ambition and desire for power, and on the other hand, she is utterly behind Macbeth's heinous acts, a perpetrator, a willing accomplice, all of the above. So where do you draw the line? Her character raises important questions about the limits of women in Shakespeare's society and their lust for power and ambition equivalent to the men, because ultimately Lady Macbeth's role was supportive of her husband in achieving his prophecy, but was it really entirely just for her husband, or was it for her? One of my favourite lines in the entire play is in Act 1, where upon sensing her husband's weakness and unwillingness to do what he needs to do, what she perceives him to need to do, she asks the spirits to unsex her, meaning take away her gender, take away the weakness associated with her gender, because she wants to do what he can't. Ultimately, she finds a way to do what he can't by using him as a vessel, encouraging him to do these things that he wants to do but won't do. Overall, Lady Macbeth is a fascinating character who is both sympathetic and morally ambiguous. Her complexities add depth and nuance to the play and makes her, as I said, in my opinion, one of Shakespeare's most vivid and fascinating characters. Why am I recapping Shakespeare's Macbeth, you ask? That's right, the entire point of this video. Lady Macbeth Syndrome is a term used to describe a psychological phenomenon in which those who have impure consciences, an impure conscience. Let's just not pluralize it, that's fine. Humbling. Those who feel they have impure being or a guilty conscience or a weight on their soul, whether it is because of a bad deed they have done or a bad deed that has been done to them, feel a compulsive desire to clean and to scrub, as if cleanliness of the physical body will equate to cleanliness of the spiritual and emotional body. This obsessive physical cleanliness is said to stand in place for moral purity. If one can scrub off the impurities of their hand and their body, it is said that one may also be able to scrub off the impurities of their conscience. I think I'm driving it home. Let me give you some examples. So Lady Macbeth Syndrome essentially is directly correlated with guilt, which can manifest in many different ways and be caused by many different things. It can happen to somebody who has done an act that does not align with their morality, or somebody who has had an act that does not align with their morality done to them, or witnessed an act that does not align with their morality. Whilst Lady Macbeth was haunted by the murders that she encouraged and was complicit to, it is not always this extreme. It does not have to be murder or bloodshed. For example, a person may feel guilt and anxiety over a decision that they made that had unintended negative consequences, or they may feel responsible for something that was beyond their control. Some real life examples of this could be parents who feel guilt and responsibility over their child's mental illness or addiction, or somebody who was a survivor of a traumatic event and feels guilty for being a survivor whilst there were not other survivors. It's a loose term, it's not even an official psychological term because it struggles to be studied, which I will go into in the next segment, but I think it's really fascinating overall how it is a recurring phenomenon presented. It can also be linked to ritual purification, which is where religion will prescribe a ritual in order to receive purification, as it really just says in the title. Good job, Dakota. This can be washing the face and the hands before praying, or in the occultist world it can be banishing rituals and whatnot, so you feel like you are able to commune with higher powers as you are clean. Cleanliness equals worthiness in many cases. There have been many studies done on Lady Macbeth syndrome and the legitimacy of it all, and many studies are inconclusive, but I'm going to talk about the ones that are relatively conclusive, or for the least part interesting. I didn't research all of this for the video, by the way. I know that you think I might have done this amazing thing for this essay to tell you, but this was all research from my book that I previously wrote, which I'll talk about later, but this just fascinated me and I wanted to get all the details that I could get, so I'm just regurgitating to novel research right now. One experiment had different groups of participants talk about a moral deed that they have done, and then they were asked to fill in blank words with letter prompts such as W blank blank H, which could be wish or wash, or S blank blank P, which could be stop or soap. Those who had been asked to recall a bad deed were 60% more likely to fill in the blank words with something hygiene related like soap or wash. I wondered myself, as somebody with OCD, about the correlation between Lady Macbeth syndrome and those with obsessive compulsive tendencies or obsessive compulsive disorder, and it was really hard to find the actual facts for, but I did come across one study. This study provided partial support for the existence of the phenomenon based on specificity to immorality. That was a whole mouthful. The results from this study concluded that hand washing did seem to solve the guilty conscience of those who were asked to recall bad deeds, and this was especially prevalent in those with OCD or OCD tendencies. The ritualistic washing seemed to create some kind of relief from a sense of shame or embarrassment. That is a very brief sum. If you're interested in reading the actual studies, I will leave links in the description box, of course. I'm no scientist. I'm no scientist whatsoever. I'm no psychologist. I am a girl in my bedroom recording videos about Macbeth. But I'm really interested in doing experiments myself on this. I'm fascinated by the phenomenon, I truly am, and I wonder how I could go about this. Maybe even we could just use the comment section as some kind of study. Comment if you feel like cleanliness equates to moral purity. Now, in case you're as interested and fascinated by this whole thing as I am, I'm going to list some books and some films with themes that are reminiscent of Macbeth, specifically Lady Macbeth's character and the syndrome associated with her name. It's quite a niche and nuanced thing to have exact recommendations based on the exact things that are explored of the syndrome after Lady Macbeth. And so my recommendations aren't exactly the whole out-damned spot theme, but more so reminiscent of Lady Macbeth's character. So female leads who are morally ambiguous, oh so complex, ambitious, all the good stuff, my favorite kind of girls. In case it isn't obvious, I think you should perhaps watch some form of adaptation of Macbeth, and my personal favourite adaptation of Macbeth is A24's recent The Tragedy of Macbeth, directed by Joel Cohen. Frances McDormand does an incredible job of Lady Macbeth. Incredible. And Catherine Hunter plays the witches and does such an incredibly accurate, spooky, eerie, but refreshing take. I can't speak enough about it. It's really wonderful. In case you didn't gather from my glowing review, it's one of my favourite films and adaptations of all time. The next is going to be a favourite of many of my viewers. I know my audience, I know you, and the next is Black Swan, 2010, I believe. It's a psychological thriller and it follows a lead who is a ballerina and becomes obsessed over obtaining the role of Black Swan in Swan Lake. She becomes so obsessed with obtaining this role in this production that she experiences hallucinations and paranoia, and her ambitions do drive her into madness, which is reminiscent of Lady Macbeth's character. I just love a film with a lead who slowly descends or quickly descends into madness, and that is one of the best in my humble opinion. I know I keep saying my humble opinion, but if I don't, I get people jump down my throat saying, who are you to decide what films are good and aren't? This is my taste. I'm sorry. The next is not a film, but it is a part of a series, and I'm sure you've heard of it, and that is Game of Thrones by George R. Martin. George R. Martin? Are there two R's? I think there's two R's, that feels right. And I am talking about Cersei Lannister. Cersei Lannister is a master manipulator, and she is driven by this intense need for power. She's willing to do whatever it takes to protect herself and her position as queen, regardless of what that means to anybody around her. She will betray anybody And if also a character is uber hateable, you gotta respect it. I think by the end of it, I really quite liked her character, despite all the horrible things that she'd done. So she's one of my favourite Lady Macbeth Reminiscent characters. For literature, of course, I'm going to say, if you haven't read Macbeth, you should read Macbeth. Taking this opportunity to show you my very special illustrated Stratford edition of Shakespeare from Chancellor Press, printed for London in what was Czechoslovakia, I think in the late 70s, the early 80s. And it's absolutely beautiful. It looks like this, and it's got all the plays in it, and it's illustrated. Let me show you Macbeth. It's absolutely beautiful, and it just makes the reading experience so fun. The second recommendation I have is Euripides' Medea. The character of Medea reminds me a lot of Lady Macbeth in the way that she is fiercely protective of what she has, and she'll go to any extent to protect her pride. My favourite adaptation of this is a book written by Rachel Cusk, which is her version of Medea, a contemporary version, and I've spoken about this before, I think, and I don't have a book to hold because I lent it to a friend, because anyone that listens, I'm like, take this is incredible. But her take on Medea's character, she really expands on the character of Medea rather than how in Euripides' play she's seen as this quite one-dimensional character who does these horrible things. In Cusk's Medea, it's quite explored and elaborated as to why, and her motives and her reasons, and that, you know, she's not just a horrible person. All these horrible things have happened, and this makes a person crumble. And it also details this descent into madness, which is my favourite, coming from a girl who is descending into madness. The next book recommendation is also a film, so this is a double whammy if you'd like to check out both, because in my opinion both are wonderful. And that is Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. This novel with adapted film tells the story of a woman who finds out her husband is cheating and makes it her life's ambition to make his life hell. She fakes her own disappearance in order to frame her husband for murder, and it's really clever. Like Lady Macbeth, Amy, the female lead, has this all-consuming desire for control. She's cunning, she's manipulative, she will go to any length to get what she wants, to protect her pride, to pursue her ambitions. It's a fascinating watch with a very complicated Lady Macbeth reminiscent character. How many times have I said that? The next example is quite a different example, and that is Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. I'm tumbling on all my words. I am talking about Amy, who is a very complex character driven by her own ambitions. She has a desire for success and recognition, and she is willing to use her beauty and betray her family if it means getting what she wants. She uses these things to manipulate people, and it's a very interesting, different perspective on a character that has these qualities. The last book I'm going to say is my book. This is On Sons Following by me, and Lady Macbeth Syndrome was a massive recurring theme throughout the poetry that I was writing for this book. I've always been fascinated by this phenomenon from the moment I found out about it. It's also a major theme in my upcoming novel, which I cannot talk about, I'm sorry. But there is a poem in my book called The Art of Bone Carving. I'm not going to read you the entire thing, but I'll read you what is inspired by Lady Macbeth. I've washed my hand 12 times today, but I still have blood dried under my fingernails from February. My flesh is stained with what we did, and you called it art, and I'll call it murder. But what matters most is the space we earned on the panel of impending doom. All that's important is we're in this together, so tell me you love me, but don't try and kiss me, because I don't need touch to know truth. Carve out my bones like we carved out a heart in the trunk of a sycamore tree, and promise me you can keep this secret forever. I did read you the whole thing, I decided I got carried away. There is also a poem in this collection called Funeral Song, in which I just published a short film for, directed by Cricket Guest, my most recent video, so check that out. It's very visually pretty. And that's also a poem after Lady Macbeth, in the way that she is complicit to a murder that she did not do, but she very much did it. And there is a line from part 2 of this poem that says, I killed him, you killed him, I held the dagger and you plunged it into his chest, and sometimes the sky leaks divinity and pretends it is rain. And that's just one line, but shameless plug. It's relevant. That's the whole reason I'm talking about this, is because of my obsession with it as I wrote my book and my future book. Enough about me, that's done. Bonus round for art that I really like, inspired by Lady Macbeth. This piece is by Henry Fuseli and it is called Lady Macbeth Seizing the Daggers, exhibited in 1812. This is the moment in Act 2, Scene 2, where Macbeth has committed the deed and staggers towards Lady Macbeth with the knives that he used. He says, "I am afraid to think what I have done. Look on it again, I dare not." It is at this point where Lady Macbeth seizes control. She steps forward. She says, "Infirm of purpose, give me the daggers." The next piece is Gabrielle von Max in 1885, titled Lady Macbeth. You can see here that she is attempting to clean her hands with the fold edge of her dress for blood that is not there. The next piece is by Alfred Stevens, and that was somewhere between the latter half of the 1800s, and this is also titled Lady Macbeth. And in this painting you can see that she is staring at her hands in horror at the blood that is, again, not there. I think the reason why I felt compelled to put so much effort into a video essay on a psychological phenomenon that isn't even officially recognized is because it is one of the most intense sources of inspiration I have had in a long time. And I think if anything can prompt any kind of art or deeper thinking, I want to share that with you. My job with my platform is to provide insight and inspiration, so I hope that you have received some kind of that, some variation. This is the part where I say goodbye. So alas, goodbye. What a lovely time we've spent together. Thank you for watching, thank you for listening, thank you for contributing to the conversation if you feel so compelled. I love you.